Nature is one of the less common elemental attributes in games. Compared to your usual fire and ice attacks, nature ones are a rare breed. Even in Final Fantasy, one of the definitive RPG franchises, seldom uses it. Nonetheless, nature-themed enemies and bosses do appear, and we're going to talk about them. As with the previous elemental countdowns, how well the boss represents their given element is the main deciding factor. How do they utilize nature? How does it tie into them as a character, and how does it play into the game mechanics? Just one thing before we begin. I gotta get some necessary supplies. There. Now we can begin. Top 10 nature bosses. So you know how some JRPG villains are driven to destroy the world by experiencing a personal tragedy? Like maybe their sheer nihilism convinced them destroying the world was justified. Well, Xdeath from Final Fantasy V evilly laughs in the face of those villains. It's funny because Xdeath seems to know he's a one-dimensional villain right out of a kid's show, and he utterly relishes in it. Every time he's on screen committing evil deeds, he's having the time of his life. And all of it's justified when you learn his backstory. As it turns out, Xdeath is actually a tree full of sealed evil spirits that just gain sentience. Thus, him being so cartoonishly evil is surprisingly believable. And since this is a JRPG, he's able to destroy plenty of towns before you take him on for the final battle. Now, aside from the occasional BS instant death attack, the fight isn't too crazy. Then Xdeath gets sucked up by the void. Oops. We then get to his next form, Neo Xdeath. It promises that it shall destroy all of existence, including itself. Yay. Finally, a villain who understands that erasing all of existence means them too. Neo Xdeath ups the ante with 4 separate parts, each with their own attacks. Of course, you now have to deal with Grand Cross, or as I like to call it, RNG, the attack. This being Final Fantasy V, however, it's easy to just cheese the fight with all kinds of methods. And if that's not good enough, you can skip the second phase entirely with a glitch. Now, Xdeath barely manages his way onto the list because while he's a tree, his fight really isn't nature-based or themed around it. It's not really all that different from your typical JRPG final boss of that era. Still though, a demonic tree. Makes you wonder what he was like as a kid.
Please stop! Trees have feelings!
If only they knew. I think Count Shaman said it best about plant-based Mega Man bosses. They tend to either be creatively odd, or they really fail at standing out. Thankfully, that's not an issue for Axel the Red, aka Spike Rosared.
Look at me, world! A dag on my eleganza!
An eccentric rose-based maverick born from a strange mutation of the Sigma virus. And boy does he stand out! Ironic since he tried to hide out in the jungle. Speaking of, really gotta admire his choice of venue. An abandoned facility in the jungle, all rusty and overgrown. Abandoned places always seem to have great ambiance, I don't get why. Anyway, before you can take on the volatile Rosebud, you'll have to traverse Axel's overgrown playground. Use the vines for climbing, and avoid grabby purple roses, thorns, gunners, and of course, the Sigma virus. At the very end, you finally confront Axel. And he's not going quietly. He can summon a huge ball of thorns to chuck at you, he can vine whip you, slice you with petals, or
you can literally be in 2 places at once.
Or he can create a clone of himself briefly. So does that make him a pot person? I really shouldn't look into it. Thankfully, if you've kept up with your RPG video game knowledge, you'll know that fire beats grass. In this case, the ground fire and quake blazer attacks. So just cleanse Axel with fire and you'll be all set. As I said, plant mavericks are kinda hit or miss, which is why Axel's so low on the list, but he more than makes up for it with his stylish aesthetics and thorny arsenal. Well, you know what they say, every rose has its thorns, and cripes do those thorns sting. While initially shrugged off when it first came out, it does my heart good to know that Luigi's Mansion has become much more appreciated nowadays. So much so that it spawned 2 sequels, including the setting for this entry, Luigi's Mansion 3 for the Switch. Hey, guess what? King Boo's at it again. What a shock. This time he's trapped Mario and company at the last resort as revenge for the last games. The rest of the party is trapped in portraits, and guess who's gotta save them all again?
Let me guess, it was me.
Yes, it's Luigi's time to shine once again as he cleans House of the Ghosts and collects elevator buttons to advance further up the hotel. One of these buttons is found on the 7th floor, the Garden Suites. Appropriate name since it's an enormous freaking greenhouse with built-in plumbing. The mad gardener behind the monstrous fauna is the ghostly botanist, Dr. Potter. And this guy's just plain rude. He seems to like messing with you more than other ghosts in the hotel, and he's hell-bent on keeping the button away from you. Of course, you're gonna have to take him on eventually, and he's armed with a bitter Venus flytrap that acts more Rottweiler than plant. Trick the flytrap into biting onto a bud, then while it's stuck, good old decapitation! They just gotta suck Potter up just long enough for his health to deplete, repeat the process, and boom! One nicely contained green-thumbed ghoul. Of course, he doesn't make it too easy for you. Seriously, you could at least keep the flytrap on a leash or something. I really gotta hand it to the Luigi's Mansion series. They know how to get ghoulishly creative with some of these ghosts, and Dr. Potter is no exception. You can't help but shiver at his handiwork. Seriously, what is it about overgrown levels in pseudo-horror games that are so dang creepy? Are people just hoping for a Mary, Mary, quite contrary horror film? If not, why not? You guys remember that dancing ghost in Swing Your Sinners? Well, he's a plant now. Feeling mold yet? Cagney Carnation is one of the tamer bosses in Cuphead, but that doesn't make him any less appealing. On top of being a tall glass of paddles, he has his own nature-themed arsenal, which makes him a fitting candidate for this list. His attacks in the first phase have a lot to do with seeds, sending acorns after you, hurling sycamores like a boomerang, and firing seeds into the sky to rain down upon thee. These seeds can turn into different plants that either chase you and trap the ground or fire bullets at you, depending on the color. In his second phase, he infests the entire bottom area with his vines and starts belching spores that could give you Yoshi's Island fuzzy flashbacks. All the while, the vines protrude into the upper platforms, keeping you up and jumping. Gotta love the music too. Floral Fury is a great track with a samba zest that captures how ecstatic it feels fighting a giant killer flower. Now, compared to other Cuphead bosses, Cagney isn't that difficult. His attacks have huge pauses you can take advantage of, and his low HP means you can quickly trivialize him from a distance with roundabout shots. That said, he's still a well-designed boss that keeps you on your toes without being too overbearing. Not to say I don't enjoy the harder bosses, but sometimes we do need something that's easier on the hands. And gardening this overgrown weed fits that bill just fine. Speaking of gardening, the world of Pikmin is the ideal place for you to imagine yourself as a tiny space gardener, fighting against the hungriest monsters nature could throw at you. Apart from the usual bulborbs, sheer grubs, and blowhogs, you also get some devilish floras like the puffstools, creeping chrysanthemums, and number 6 on this list, Quagmirelops. This malformed piece of earth might just be the biggest and most intimidating enemy you'll encounter in Pikmin 3. But then you realize that everyone in the game is the size of a housefly, so this thing is probably only about as big as a coffee table at best.
Hey, don't underestimate coffee tables. Your shins and your pinky toes will tell you the tales of its horrors.
Fair point. Taking down this massive floral parasite is no easy task. Mireclops will stomp all over the bog it's in, putting any non-rock Pikmin at risk of getting crushed. And each time it stomps, it creates a pool of water, risking the rock Pikmin drowning. Taking it off its rocker requires you to give its toe a good stubbing and tilt it out of balance. Once down, you'll have to lay your Pikmin all over its head, but be warned, Mireclops is not defenseless here. It will pull out its tongue and eat any nearby Pikmin. Unless you whistle them out in time, the Pikmin caught in the slurping are as good as dead. Given how Pikmin 3 introduces one boss per area, some players most likely never expected to end up fighting this boss. And when it caught them by surprise, it was glorious. A solid combination of intimidating design, a challenging fight, and adding further into Pikmin's bestiary of weird and wonderful creatures. What more can you ask from nature's own living furniture? Well, time for the Zelda entry. That shouldn't be surprising. With the huge variety of bosses in this series, it being here is just natural.
Nothing can be as bad as ice bosses. Nothing can be as bad as ice bosses.
Okay, well, let's talk about Wind Waker. Not a Zelda game I talk about too often on these countdowns, because it only has like 6 of them, but it's still good bosses in it itself. As for nature bosses, let's go to the end of the Forbidden Woods and get there just in time to see a giant flower just devour a Korok. Honestly, after collecting all the seeds in Breath of the Wild, that was cathartic. Oh yeah, we still need to save the little guy. So say hello to numero 5, Calademos. For anyone who's played Ocarina, this guy fights pretty similarly to the boss of Jabu Jabu's belly, Baronade, and how you beat it is the same. With the handy dandy boomerang you got in his dungeon, target Deimos' tentacles at the very top, throw and pray cut down a few of them. While you're doing this, you need to avoid the closer obstacles that can swing down towards you or just bury underground to successfully hit you from below. Once you hit all the tentacles, the flower will come down and the Dekubaba core can be weed whacked with your sword. Do all this the normal 3 times and this flower will wilt without bringing out the weed killer. Or if you need the weed killer, that would be the forest water you can get from the Great Deku Tree. Grab some and bring it here before the time limit ends and you can one-shot the boss without drawing your sword, which is the weed whacker in this case. Okay, these metaphors are killing me.
Weed killing you?
I hate you. I was also thinking about putting Diababa from Twilight Princess on this list, but that fight's more nature poison combo than just straight up nature. Still, this boss might be simple, but it does the job well. It lets your skills with the boomerang bloom, and now the Forbidden Woods has some extra fertilizer.
Alright, these plant dogs are growing wild. I have to uproot them at the source later. How do I turn it off?
Did you know that cherry blossoms are seen as a symbol of death in Japan? That's why you see so many of them in anime and games. Why do I bring this up? Well, we're talking about Marluxia.
What's that? You thought I couldn't find a way to sneak Kingdom Hearts into one of these boss countdown lists at some point?
You learn nothing!
First introduced in Chain of Memories, Marluxia is one of the most devious members of Organization 13. As the main villain of that game, he nearly succeeds in turning Sora against his friends. Like all other members of the organization, he's affiliated with an elemental attribute. In this case, nature. As a boss, Marluxia's been fought against in 3 games. This raises the question of which battle against him is the best. If you include every single one, there are technically 7. Right out the bat, I'm unfortunately gonna have to disqualify the fights against him in Chain of Memories. These aren't bad by any stretch of the imagination, especially in Re-Chain of Memories. I like the spectacle. It's just that, well, it's Chain of Memories. You have to go out of your way to not make it a complete joke. As for the battle against him in 3 and Remind, I'm sorry, but the whole Doom thing just kills it for me. Maybe it's my PTSD from Demix talking, but I can't stand time limits and boss fights. That leaves us with, what a shock, the battle against him in Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. The main gimmick in this battle is that your level becomes your hit points. Abandon all hope, level 1 critical mode players who enter here. This adds a layer of urgency to the battle as you can't just heal off everything like usual. Fortunately, it's possible to gain levels back with a reaction command. In addition, you also have to contend with stuff like his pools of darkness and thorn bombs. And like all members of Organization 13, Marluxia is not without a desperation attack. Of course, the fight has the same problem as Xdeath, where the whole nature thing is more of just window dressing. Still, good fight that makes clever use of the whole Reaper motif.
There will be a day when I will not be able to put Kingdom Hearts at all into one of these countdowns. But today is not this day!
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I come before you today to tell you that a crime has been committed. A crime that has been ongoing for years. But no more, I say, no more! The crime, you ask? The criminal underappreciation of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon explores a time/darkness/sky. To facilitate the bringing of justice to this matter, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, our number 3 entry on this list, Grovile.
Court dismissed! Bring in the dancing lobsters!
For those still tragically unaware, the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games are a top-down dungeon crawler roguelike. In the Explorers series of Mystery Dungeon games, you're a human who has somehow become a Pokemon. You quickly find yourself teamed up with another Pokemon, and together you form a rescue team. As you try to unravel the mystery of how you became a Pokemon by entering dungeons, word spreads of a mysterious villain who is stealing artifacts known as Time Gears. To steal such a thing is sacrilege, as each theft freezes time in the local area. Many fear that when enough gears are stolen, the world as a whole will freeze in time, never again to move. As the game progresses, it seems more and more of the mystery of who we were and the mystery of why anyone would steal the Time Gears seem to be linked. Eventually, this leads us to finding Grovile in the middle of an attempt to steal one of the Time Gears from a Xdeath. A Xdeath, in a move of desperation, seals the Time Gear in crystal. Grovile turns to attack a Xdeath in the hope that by eliminating the Lake Guardian, the crystals would disappear. But you and your partner stand in the way. After brawling with Grovile, who has a moveset of Leaf Blade, Dig, Quick Attack, and Absorb, Grovile knocks you away with such might that you're paralyzed, and your partner can only barely move between Grovile and a Xdeath. This is all for the Time Gear.
Forgive me!
With this shout, Grovile attacks. But at the last instant, your partner is saved by Dusk Noir. As the scene plays out, it becomes clear that Dusk Noir and Grovile have some kind of history. Before anything can really start making sense, Grovile flees and Dusk Noir gives chase. It's interesting to me that a boss whose whole goal seems to be disrupting nature ended up being so high on the list. But as anyone who's played these games can tell you, appearances can be deceiving. Oh, there's also the fact of him being a plant gecko thing. That helps too. Wispy Woods. How we love your immobile nature and barely threatening disposition. Most Kirby games tend to put this guy as your first big obstacle, and for most of the time, he puts up less of a fight than the average waddle do. I mean, seriously, apples and spit clouds doesn't exactly scream Forest Guardian if you ask me. Regardless, he is pretty iconic and fits pretty well in Dreamland's cavalcade of strangely charming creatures. With how often you face Wispy in most Kirby games, there's bound to be a few fights that are a lot more impressive than you'd wager he would put up. What the heck, we're this deep into the woods, so let's list down some of Wispy's best outings. Kirby's Dreamland 3. Tired of standing around and let Kirby pelt him, he decided to uproot and chase Kirby himself. Better watch your step, cause he's coming for ya! Kirby 64. Wispy doesn't appreciate seeing his saplings killed, so he rains you with fruits from all sides and sends big spiky roots after you. Now that's a good parent. Mass Attack. Oh look, he's standing still again, waiting to be pulverized. Psych! He blows a whole storm through your Kirbys and towers himself up for a triple-phased defense. And thanks to your massive squad hitbox, his falling pinecoats suddenly seem a lot more threatening. Rainbow Curse. The storm wasn't enough. How about an entire hurricane? Throwing bombs and spikes to level your playing field, and the fact that you can't even hurt the Sky High version until you charge up your attack. Triple Deluxe. You've heard of Walking Wispy. Now try Jumping Wispy. Or Flowery, sure. Taking a page from 64, he attacks you from a distance and even tries to impale you with his oversized vines. Flowers look pretty good on him too. Planet Robobot. If we're being honest, the greatest Wispy fight. Clanky would substitute the usual apples and gusts in favor of missiles, drills, and explosive balls of metal hailing from his pipes. Oh, it doesn't stop there. He even chases you around and traps you between walls of land where you have to endure his desperation attack. Nature and technology sure blend well together. So, as you can tell, there's little middle ground when it comes to the Wispy Woods battles. You either bruise a helpless hunk of wood, or fight for your life against nature's creative, yet bloodthirsty rampage. And we sure as heck love him for it. No matter what game he's in or how he turns out, we'll always have a soft spot for our unpredictable, yet iconic, Guardian of the Woods. Petey Piranha, Super Mario Sunshine. Whether it's poisons or plants, the big bad piranha's got it covered. Plantman.exe, Battle Network 3. This tendril-loving assassin eats sick children for a living. I wish I was kidding. Omega Flowey, Undertale. There ain't nothing natural about this abomination. But, you know, plants and such. Gardenia, Pokemon Gen 4. She uses her gym's environment to test your scavenging skills, and it really highlights her passion for grass Pokemon.
Nature always wins.
Pamela Isley, once a mousy little botanist. She ended up getting caught in a lab accident, as you do, and was reborn as the vivacious, venomous environmentalist and one of Batman's most formidable foes, Poison Ivy. With an eerie connection to plants, her mastery at seduction, and a toxic touch, she can have any man or woman eating out of the palm of her hands before either strangling them with her leafy arsenal or making them drop dead with her noxious kisses. And yet, her relationship with Harley Quinn is weirdly wholesome.
Yes, the femme fatale who kills people in the name of Mother Nature and is literally named Poison Ivy is somehow a healthier influence on Harley than the Joker. I mean, that's not saying much, but still!
But we're not here to talk about her love life, we're here for her history in the Arkham games. She starts out as just another inmate at Arkham, still as obsessed with her plants as ever, but gives Batman a hint at how to deal with the Joker's Titan project. But when Joker gives her a taste of Titan, you'd expect her to turn into some kind of She-Hulk Jolly Green Giant hybrid, but instead...
Welcome to the jungle. We got fun and games.
Are we sure Joker's still running the show here? No, seriously, at this point, Ivy's the one in control. Her plants completely cover Arkham Island, successfully managing to break through to the Batcave, and a few of them start releasing toxic spores that can and will hurt you. So yeah, she's got all of Arkham wrapped around her green thumb. The only way to stop her hostile herbage hullabaloo, try saying that 5 times fast, is to confront the deranged gardener herself, who is conveniently protected by a giant monster flower and an army of hypnotized admirers. The fight itself isn't exactly rocket science. Dodge her vines and spores, hit her with your batarangs, and shatter her protective dome with the explosive gel. It'll take a while, but the effort will be worth it to bring Arkham's flora under control. I know what you're thinking. It feels a little obvious putting Poison Ivy at number 1, knowing that there are better boss fights in the Arkham franchise. Well, my response to that is, okay, and? Say what you will, but she earned her spot on this list. She said it herself once.
I am nature's arm, her spirit, her will. Hell, I am Mother Nature.
And she kinda is. She became half plant, she obsesses and nurtures anything green, she's weaponized flowers, vines, and plants in general. She had all of Arkham Asylum at her mercy, so yeah, she's the big green contender. That, plus I really like the little arc they gave her throughout the game series, going from another classic face in Batman's Rogues Gallery to the hero Gotham didn't think it needed. Granted, she did it more for the plants than for humanity, but she still took that risk with no questions asked. In a way, she really is a human plant, growing as an individual before blossoming into a surprise hero, putting the needs of others before herself.
Nature always wins.
I'm Josh Scorcher, and keep an eye out for next month. It's gonna go by fast.
Hey everyone, this is Josh. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Please check out my other social media like my Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr. Check out my other channels such as Joshua Burner for reactions and other stuff, Dragon Fighter Gaming for tabletop, and Bob Equestria for cartoons. Consider checking below the video and donating to my Patreon, Streamlabs for my merchandise, or becoming a YouTube member. Thanks for watching.